You couldn't even close this deal? Seriously, Mark? I rolled my eyes, barely bothering to hide the disdain in my voice. Our dinner party was winding down. Most of the guests had left, but Mark's old business partner, Jim, was still lingering. I guess pity made him stick around. Mark was fumbling through his half-hearted excuses about the project tanking, something about miscommunication and yada yada. It made me want to scream. Hey, how about some more wine, guys? Sarah, Jim's wife, swooped in like she always did, the bubbly peacemaker. She gave me that knowing look, the "don't be too hard on him" thing she sometimes did. I almost snorted. The night had been fine, on the surface. Food was good, some mildly interesting conversations. But underneath it all, that familiar, gnawing feeling was back. Mark, ever the underachiever, and me, stuck playing supportive wife to a guy who just couldn't get it together. Things really shifted when Dr. Evans arrived late. He'd been a friend of Sarah's for ages, a psychologist, and someone I was vaguely curious about. He was definitely handsome, kind of an intense vibe. We'd chatted a bit, nothing earth-shattering, but I could feel it, the charge in the air. Then it happened. I was grabbing more ice or something, and turned around to see them, Mark and Dr. Evans, looking right at each other. Not just a polite glance, but this charged pause. I caught a flicker in the doc's eyes. The seed was planted right there, the seed of doubt, of something not quite right. After everyone left, that's when it kicked off. Mark started in about how I might have embarrassed him, and I told him to get a damn grip. I said he was too passive, too stuck in his comfort zone, and that's why his big projects always fizzled. It wasn't anything new, these fights, but this time felt heavier. Like the cracks in our perfect-looking life were finally starting to widen. The argument with Mark didn't fade away like they usually did. It lingered, this cold ache in my chest. I woke up restless, replaying the things I'd said, the look on his face. Pathetic, really. Mark was my husband, not some punching bag. Later that week, it was like I couldn't breathe right. Stupid anxiety flare up, just my luck. My friend Sarah, bless her heart, suggested I finally do something about it. Remember that therapist she'd been raving about? Dr. Evans? Yeah, I booked an appointment. Why the hell not? Dr. Evans' office was surprisingly calming. Not like those sterile medical places. Warm colors, some cool abstract art. The guy himself wasn't so bad on the eyes either. All serious and attentive, making me feel heard instead of judged. At first, I was all business. Work stress, the usual. But something made me stumble into talking about Mark. How distant things felt, how tired I was of the same old fights. Dr. Evans didn't say much, just those insightful nods, prompting me on. It felt damn good to vent to someone who wasn't going to snap back or play peacemaker. Meanwhile, back home, things were shifting. Not big dramatic shifts, but subtle. I started taking more care with my appearance, not for Mark, but myself. Bought some slinky new things. Splashed on my old perfume, the one I hadn't touched in ages. I felt, I don't know, lighter. Mark definitely noticed. Not in a big way, just these sideways glances. He probably thought I was losing it, but he didn't say a word. I started getting that prickly feeling, like I had a secret humming under my skin. The secret had a name: my phone. I'd never been the type glued to the damn thing, but suddenly I couldn't let it out of sight. New habit. Screen face down, password activated, jumping every time it buzzed. It was exhilarating, and kind of scary. But who was I even texting, anyway? Mostly just Emily from work, dishing about office drama and sharing stupid memes. It was nothing. And yet, it was something. A tiny, rebellious spark in the drab routine of my life. So, helpful, right? I chirped a little too brightly at Mark. He was hunched over his laptop, barely grunting in response. I was fishing, hoping he'd ask me about my therapy session. Dr. Evans had become this thing in my head. A little sanctuary of understanding, where for 1 hour a week, I didn't feel judged or nagged. Mark's sessions, I gathered, were going well too. Talking more, opening up, all that good stuff. It should have made me happy, but honestly, it just made everything feel more complicated. See, the thing about Dr. Evans wasn't the therapy itself, good as that was. It was those moments afterward. The quick coffee to go over a few things he'd suggest, which always turned into an hour of surprisingly easy conversation. His little smiles, lingering eye contact that made my face go warm. Nothing inappropriate, not really. Just enough to set off a little thrill. Stupid, I know. I wasn't an idiot. Therapist and patient, the worst cliché ever. But there it was. And let's be honest, Mark wasn't exactly setting the world on fire in the romance department. The other night, he fell asleep mid-movie, snoring on the couch like an old bulldog. That's when the late nights at work excuse started. Extra project, big deadline, blah blah blah. Mark bought it, or pretended to. He looked tired, and not just from work. Distrust was starting to seep in, eating away at the edges of what was left between us. Then, the bomb dropped. I'd finished a session with Dr. Evans, was feeling that post-therapy floatiness when I saw them. Mark and Dr. Evans, stepping out of that little cafe across the street. My stomach did this weird flip-flop. They were talking, heads close, and there was this intimacy in the way they stood. I ducked into a doorway, heart pounding. Had they seen me? When I peeked out, they were gone. It all could have been innocent, but my gut screamed otherwise. That night, the lies to Mark about my late work flowed easier than ever before. The buzz of my phone under the covers, its faint glow hidden from Mark's sleepy eyes. It felt like I was playing a dangerous game. One I wasn't sure how to stop. I went home and cut my hair. Not some dramatic breakup makeover, but a good 5 inches gone. Felt good, symbolic. I needed a change, something drastic to kick me out of the rut I didn't even realize I'd fallen into. The new Laura was bolder. Low tops with dresses, a hint of red lipstick I usually reserved for nights out, which hadn't happened in ages. Mark blinked, then did his usual non-reaction thing, like he hadn't even noticed. My coworker Emma did though. Ooh, someone's got a spring in her step, she quipped. That made me laugh. Maybe there was someone, kinda. The secrecy was a wicked kind of thrill. I imagined bumping into Mark on the street, me on Dr. Evans' arm, just to see his face. Twisted, yeah, but so satisfying in my head. The reality, of course, was far more careful. Texts that self-deleted, hushed phone calls in the bathroom, lies that came so easily it was scary. Dr. Evans was caught in the spiral too. His feedback sessions turned into lingering lunches, where the conversation strayed far from therapy. I could see him fighting it, the good doctor routine crumbling a little. But there was always that look in his eyes, a hunger that matched my own. As for Mark, lost at sea, that's how he seemed. One night I heard him on the phone with his crazy old college friend, Jake. Going out for drinks, he said, like he was trying to convince himself it was a good idea. I'd heard stories about Jake, a party animal, the kind of guy who peaked in college and never moved on. It was pathetic, and a little worrying. Just drinks, I'd suggested to Dr. Evans later that week. We both knew it wasn't going to end there. The electricity between us was undeniable. A hotel lobby bar, dim and anonymous, felt like the perfect place to fall. The kiss was everything, desperate, thrilling, wrong. We didn't even talk, just went straight for his room. The aftermath was a blur of guilt and a sick kind of giddy excitement. Dr. Evans, the calm, controlled therapist, was as lost in the undertow as I was. And the worst part? I couldn't wait to do it all again. The morning after always hit worse. The hotel sheets rumpled and cold, the leftover taste of stolen kisses gone sour. Dr. Evans would leave, slipping back into his professional persona like a damn chameleon. I'd pull myself together, splash water on my face, and head home to play the role of dutiful wife. Guilt gnawed at me, not some grand moral reckoning, but the practical kind. Fear of getting caught, destroying the life I'd built. And yet, every time I saw Mark, the thrill outweighed it. I'd dissect his every move, tired eyes, rumpled shirt, and feel a jolt of spiteful satisfaction. Look what you made me do, I'd think. Then there was the sneaking around. My heart hammered every time I grabbed my phone, the paranoia a constant hum. Mark wasn't an idiot. He noticed the changes, the late nights, the distracted air. Started making snide remarks, little digs disguised as jokes. They stung, not because they hit the truth, but because they revealed how clearly he saw me slipping away from him. He was spiraling too. Calls from work about missed deadlines, piles of laundry. He never did laundry before. Those half-empty bottles of whiskey appearing in the recycling. We were like two magnets, but instead of pulling closer, we repelled each other. It was strangely thrilling, but also so twisted. Dr. Evans, the picture of composure, wasn't faring much better. His attempt to cut things off with me only fueled the fire. He started acting strange during sessions, distracted, slipping into unprofessional moments of raw desire. It was hot, in a messed up sort of way, but it scared me too. Was he unraveling so badly he'd risk everything? My lies became masterpieces. Working late, weekend girls trip, even a fake migraine once or twice. Mark would eye me with suspicion, but he didn't push. Maybe he didn't want to know the truth. But the truth had a way of sneaking up on you. It was Mark's forgotten laptop, of all stupid things. A late night where I brazenly kissed Dr. Evans goodbye in the parking garage, figuring Mark was long asleep. He wasn't. In the kitchen, he confronted me about the laptop. I panicked, and then my phone buzzed. One text from Dr. Evans, filthy, explicit, glowing on the screen. Mark saw it. The world went silent. The truth crashed down around us. The explosion was quiet, deadly. Not yelling, or things thrown. Mark went ice cold. Eyes like I'd never seen them before, a deep, empty fury replacing the usual tired resignation. He didn't question me, not about the text. Just shoved the phone in my face, a single word escaping his lips. Whore. Then he walked away. Inside, I was screaming. Not at him, at myself. Humiliation flooded me, hot and stinging. The thrill of the affair vanished, replaced by the stark reality of the wreckage it had caused. But even worse was this dread settling over me. Mark wasn't the type to blow up and let it go. This was different. Something in him had shifted, something dark. For days, I moved in a daze. Mark barely spoke. An eerie calm hung in the air, broken only by his barbed comments, each one aimed perfectly at my weak spots. Hair looks nice, shame it's for someone else, or, losing weight. Don't need to impress me anymore, right? It was torture, worse than any shouting match. I was desperate to understand, to know what he was thinking, but he gave nothing away. Just that cold, calculating watchfulness. It was chilling. Then came the invitation. Couples therapy, he announced one night, as if it were the most casual thing in the world. I blinked, completely thrown. He couldn't be serious, but the glint in his eyes told me he was. We should try, don't you think? He smiled, a twisted, mirthless thing. My gut churned. A trap, it had to be. Yet, some desperate part of me clung to hope. Maybe this was his way of fixing things, of forgiving. The therapist's office was familiar territory, yet utterly alien. Mark under an obviously fake name, the nervous energy crackling in the room as I tried to decipher his plan. And then, the therapist walked in. And the world imploded. Dr. Evans. Mark watched my face, a predator savoring the moment. Now I understood. This wasn't therapy. It was a stage, crafted perfectly for his brand of revenge. And I was the only actor left in the dark. The first words choked out of my mouth. Mark, what the hell are you? He cut me off, his voice as cold as steel. Dr. Evans, this is my wife, Laura. It seems you two are acquainted. The look on Dr. Evans' face. Shock, then a sickly kind of recognition as it dawned on him. He tried to stammer out some pathetic excuse. I didn't know. But Mark silenced him with a look I never imagined he was capable of. Save the act. I know everything. Mark reached into his pocket, pulled out a stack of papers, printouts of texts, dates, times. He hadn't been idle, he'd been building a case. Dr. Evans wilted under the proof of it all. A pathetic picture of a man destroyed by his own weakness. As for me, I was drowning. Mark wasn't just exposing me, he was dissecting the affair. Every lie, every tryst laid bare like a grotesque science exhibit. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. The tears came then, not pretty sobs of shame, but hot, angry tears of desperate self-preservation. Please, Mark, I'll do anything. I begged, some shred of my pathetic dignity left. You will. He stepped closer, and for the first time since he found out, I saw a true crack in his composure. It wasn't the pain I'd expected, but something darker, something twisted with satisfaction. You'll stay married to me, live with me. Everything, on the surface, will be as it was. He paused, let the words hang between us. But now I own you. Every time you kiss me, touch me, you'll know whose you really are. And he. A flick of his head toward the ruined therapist, he gets to watch. That's his penance. Humiliation washed over me in waves. Being caught was one thing, but this was a life sentence without hope of parole. I opened my mouth to fight, but the look in Mark's eyes shut me down. This wasn't up for debate. It was his punishment, crafted with chilling precision. Dr. Evans, that paragon of empathy, couldn't even bring himself to meet my gaze. Shame twisted his features, mixed with a strange fear. He realized, too late, the monster he'd helped unleash. Mark was broken, yes, but it wasn't the sad, pathetic brokenness of before. This was something sharp and dangerous, and aimed directly at us both. The drive home was silent, every bump in the road jarring. Mark hadn't let Dr. Evans go. Said he'd handle the situation. I didn't want to know what that meant, for him, or for me. Life became a grotesque play, Mark the twisted director. Outwardly, we were perfect. Dinner parties, smiles for his colleagues, me playing the doting wife at some fundraiser or another. Behind closed doors, it was a different world. At first, it was just words. Whispers in the dark, Mark reminding me of Dr. Evans, of what I'd done. He'd find some fault, my makeup too heavy, a missed button. Did he like you better this way? He'd ask, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Each comment was like a tiny razor cut, chipping away at the bits of myself I had left. Then, the public rituals began. He wouldn't take me on some romantic getaway, oh no. Instead, he'd drag me to bookstores where Evans sometimes did readings, or a coffee shop the doc was rumored to frequent. Just in case you run into a friend, Mark would say, and I'd know the game I had to play. The day he laid out the plan, I knew it was coming, but it still made my stomach turn. I was to make contact with Dr. Evans, pretend like nothing was wrong, maybe even offer those feedback sessions again. Lure him in. Mark was giddy, laying out the scenario. He'd watch from the shadows, step in just as things got interesting. He'll have to beg, Laura, grovel in front of you, and you'll reject him. Just like you did me. It was madness, pure madness. I should have fought, run away. But the broken parts of me, the pieces that had always craved something darker, were twistedly intrigued. To see Dr. Evans shattered, to make him pay. There was a strange kind of thrill in it, even as it disgusted me. You won't back out, Mark said, and he didn't need to. The truth was, I didn't want to. I was already too far gone, caught in his terrible web. And the worst part? I was starting to see the satisfaction in surrender. The hotel room felt like a tomb. Silk sheets, expensive liquor Mark wouldn't normally touch. It wasn't a seduction, it was a stage, carefully designed for an audience of one. I dressed the part. Tight skirt I swore I'd never wear again, a hint of lace. My stomach churned, but I forced myself through the motions. The text to Dr. Evans was simple, deliberately vague. Need your professional advice, as a friend. He took the bait, the poor fool. When he arrived, the shock on his face was almost comical. But beneath it, I saw the hunger flare. Pathetic, how easy it was. Mark's plan was to reveal himself at the pivotal moment. But he couldn't resist the little torments along the way. A cough from the shadows, the door creaking open then slamming shut. Dr. Evans was a wreck, shifting between guilt-ridden babbling and desperate, pleading glances at me. That's when the line from ages ago, my cruel dismissal of Mark, so weak I can't stand it, played in my head. My mouth moved before I could stop it. You always were weak, weren't you? I whispered to Dr. Evans. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. He snapped, not into some grand, dramatic outburst. It was pathetic, honestly. Crumpling to the floor, begging me to leave. That's when Mark stepped into view, his face an icy mask of satisfaction. Then, chaos. Dr. Evans, on his knees, spitting out apologies and incoherent excuses. Mark coldly dissecting every flaw, every lie, every pathetic weakness the therapist had displayed. And me. Standing between them, an actor who'd finally found her perfect, twisted role. I don't want to describe what Mark demanded next. Let's just say it involved humiliation, degradation. Dr. Evans was a shattered mess, ready to do anything to make it stop. Mark's twisted act of revenge was complete. Afterwards, in the car, the silence was deafening. The victory Mark had craved should have been heady, thrilling. But his face was blank, the satisfaction already gone. I didn't feel anything close to triumph either. Just a cold, hollow dread. We had become monsters, each one of us feeding on the destruction. There was no happy ending here, no redemption. Only ashes, and the knowledge that whatever twisted path we were on, the worst was probably still yet to come. The world tilted on its axis. News of Evan's ruin reached me through Sarah's sobs, career destroyed, wife gone. Some vicious part of me felt grim satisfaction, but it left me even emptier. My prison wasn't made of walls, it was the house I shared with Mark. Haunted looks, silent meals, a charade of happiness we both despised. And Mark, he hadn't become a stereotypical villain. Just hollow. Work became an obsession, hiding from himself. He drank more, coldly, never losing control. I was a ghost, he barely noticed. The ripple effects were everywhere. Dr. Evans' shattered patience. Emily from work, her suspicious eyes. Mark's friend Jake, who'd unknowingly pushed Mark further down. Would he ever realize his part? Then, an ordinary, heartbreaking moment. Mark found an old photo of us on a beach trip. smiling, truly happy, before everything. He stared, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then he tucked it away, the moment gone. No grand apologies, no promises. That was the worst. The past hung over us, a constant reminder. Escape fantasies played out in my head, the clean break, messy divorce, a new life. But cowardice held me back, and the knowledge that even if I left, the damage was done. We both carried our scars. This story's ending is bleak. Maybe there's hope down a long, hard road. But for now, there's only wreckage and the chilling reality of how easy it is to fall this far. And how damn hard the journey back might be, if we even find the path.